Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today, we're talking with Okeoma Moronu, which I'm probably mispronouncing, which I apologize, who is a BigLaw mid-level associate and is creator of the Happy Lawyer Project. Your Law School Toolbox host is Alison Lee. Normally, I'm here with Lee Burgess, and we are here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We are the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Career Conference, and I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back. Today, we're talking with Okeoma Moronu, a BigLaw mid-level associate and creator of the Happy Lawyer Project. Welcome. Well, first off, let's get this out of the way. Do you really think lawyers can actually be happy? Is that allowed?
I actually love that question because I honestly think people that believe they're not allowed to be happy. Like, people come into the profession thinking that part of what they're signing on for is this unhappiness.
Right. I mean, why do you think that is? Is it just sort of media representations, or is there something, underlying this?
I think there's a lot to it. I think part of it has to do with the idea that we believe that we're being compensated with money. And
right.
So we're giving up happiness for money. And like the idea that you could both be happy and have a lot of money is also kind of a weird thing socially and culturally.
Right. What's funny, I think the happiest BigLaw partners I know are the ones who care the most about money.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because both people who care about money and who don't care about money. And I think that people who care about money stay in it and make the money, but that's not what makes them happy.
Yeah, I used to think that, but I worked with this partner who's like one of the happiest lawyers I know. And I was like, well, why do you keep doing this? She's like, I just really like having nice stuff. And I realized my father wasn't going to buy it my whole life. And I was like, well, that's one answer.
Well, yes. And so the stuff makes her happy, right? So the money is always just a tool.
Sure.
And so I think you have to have a vision for what you want your life to look like. And the money can facilitate that vision. If you're in it just for the money and like no one wants to just count the dollar bills in their bank account.
Right. No, that's and also, what I tell people is if you really want to make a lot of money, there are probably easier ways to do it.
Also true. And there's lots of ways to make money, but I think that idea that we have to sacrifice our happiness to make money is one that gets people going down the wrong road.
Yeah, that was one of the things I felt like when I was a BigLaw associate is that somehow it was almost like they'd bought my entire life because they were paying me so much. And so like I felt like at some point I didn't have any ownership of my time.
And I think that can be really true for a lot of young associates. And one of the big secrets of BigLaw is that it gets so much better.
Well, let's talk about that because you are a bit of a rarity, statistically speaking. What year? You're like a fifth year, sixth year, something like that?
I'm a sixth year.
Okay, so you're a sixth year associate in BigLaw. So already You're past the sort of, 80% burnout leave rate. I think it's the first, 3 to 5 years, something like 80% of associates leave. So not only are you a sixth year, which means you've made it past the majority of, most associates, you're also a woman and a minority and the mother of 2 kids. So tell me about this. How are you making it work?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I didn't find it that hard to make it work because I never saw myself being here this long.
Okay.
So I'm somebody who has always been beholden to my priorities, not to my schedule.
Okay. Explain that.
So for some people, they feel very clear that they want to, do things in their career by a certain amount of time.
Okay. Like by 30, I have to be a partner.
Correct. Or making a certain amount of money, or having a certain amount of clients, or doing something that they feel like is going to catapult their life career-wise. For me, I was always very clear that I wanted to be a mother. Mm-hmm. I wanted to travel well. I wanted to eat well. And I never thought that BigLaw was going to be the thing that allowed me to do that. It wasn't really a thought about the how. I knew that coming out of Columbia, I would always have ways to make money,
right.
you know? That wasn't something I was concerned about. And I was always going to try and follow kind of the easiest way to make that money. And I know you're thinking BigLaw could not possibly
Well, I
easiest
mean,
way to make that money. But for me at the time it was, because I came out of law school right after the recession.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't very many jobs.
Sure.
And there weren't many jobs that were paying what BigLaw was paying. And I, at that point, didn't, like a lot of law school students, know what else I could do with a degree.
Yeah, of course. I mean, why would you?
Of course not. No, I definitely was one of those people who went to law school because I thought it would, don't like kill me now, open doors. And like, I was good at like reading and,
all those. I went to law school because I was good at reading.
Like, I love to read. I like to learn, all these like really ridiculous reasons to take on $250,000 of debt.
Some ways. So, I mean, I think I don't know. I struggle with that because I sort of went to law school in a lot of ways just because I thought I would be good at it and I thought I could make a living. I mean, is that a good enough reason? I'm not sure, but I think that's why a lot of people are there.
Yes, and I think that if you are correct in that assessment of yourself, then it works out, right? Because if you're correct in that assessment and you're ranked high enough in your class, then it does open doors and you are going to do all right. But I think for people, not everyone can be in the top 25%. Like, that's statistically how that works.
Right.
So some people are wrong in that assessment. And for those people, you need to go with real clarity about what you think that degree is going to get you. And so it really is about going in with a clear plan about what classes you're going to take, how you're going to leverage the resources and the connections that you can make while you're at law school. Because if you're not going to be in the top of your class, you're going to have to hustle a little harder to figure out what you're going to do next. And there's lots of things you can do. I mean, there's lots of people who are in the bottom half of law schools who have very happy, successful careers. But the people who are able to do that are often the people who went in with real clarity on what they were going to do, who are a little bit misguided about how well they thought they were going to do.
Well, I think that helps. Anyway, if I think back, I went to Columbia and graduated in the middle of a boom where anyone who was breathing could basically get a big law job. But I still think that the people who have ended up being the most content with their career path are the people who went in with the clearest idea of what they were looking for. The people like me who are kind of like, oh yeah, I'll be good at this. Like I can make a living. But I didn't really have a great idea of what I was going to do or some great passion for an area of the law or anything like that. We're the people who kind of, have meandered into different options, shall we say. Not like, we're unhappy, but, I think, for example, of a friend who was a year below me and knew from the start she wanted to be a federal public defender. And that was her entire focus, was getting that job, getting that experience, taking those classes. And now she's a federal public defender. I actually saw her a few weeks ago. And she's extremely happy.
Absolutely. And that makes sense. And I couldn't agree more because anybody who knows what they want to do and is able to accomplish it is going to be happier than people who are kind of just moving forward with little clarity or little purpose.
I think the thing that I didn't realize, and I think probably a lot of other people don't realize at schools, at these top schools, is you basically are on this conveyor belt to a destination from day one.
Yep.
And if that is not the destination that you think might be the best option for you, you're facing an uphill battle to do something else. And there's nothing wrong with sort of getting on this conveyor belt and having someone pay you a lot of money. But I think you just have to be, I didn't understand like how quickly those decisions were going to start having to be made.
Yeah. And I'd be interested to know how it is now, because I think your experience and my experience were probably very different because I came in where there weren't jobs. I mean, something like it was only 60% of us were actually gainfully employed when I graduated.
That's pretty astonishing.
And, another 20 to 30% were employed through Columbia-sponsored fellowships and all sorts of
like kind of fake jobs.
Yes. Correct. I mean, and most of those people have now done fine now that the economy is kind of doing much better. But none of them who thought they wanted to be in BigLaw have been able to get back into BigLaw because I think that's a really hard transition to make.
I think that's right. I mean, clearly the path is, you do the summer associate position, you go to that firm. I mean, for me, I had weird summer associate positions and never actually went. The firm I ended up working for was not one I'd summered at. But again, I think that's a lot harder these days.
Yes, definitely. And I know that even some firms are bringing back 1L summers, which I have mixed feelings about. But
yeah, I did that. It was, it was fun. It was a lot of money. It might not have been the best like long-term career choice, just because again, like it put me on this path that basically there was very little way to get out of. Your 1L summer is really like the chance. If you think that you're going to take a big law job, but maybe you want to transition to something else later, that's really your chance to sort of explore a different option before you're on this like very pre-professional track. But
exactly. But I also find it really challenging to interview for 1L summer positions because I feel like they know so little about.
Oh God, I knew nothing.
Correct. And
I mean, I think of like assignments that they gave me. I remember one where some contracts thing, and I'd never seen like corporate on contracts in my life. Like they just don't tell you about that at law school. And, this senior associate gave me some assignment to research this question, and I did my research, and I came back to him after a couple of hours, and he says, how sure are you that this is right? And I'm like, well, I've been to 1 year of law school and spent like an hour on it. I think it's right. Why? And he's like, well, because I'm not sure I have time to check your work, and I'm getting ready to put it in a brief. And you're just like, oh my God, like, hello, eye-opening. This is crazy. What have I gotten into?
Correct. But to be fair, part of the legal and the big law experience is getting used to that feeling.
Oh, exactly. It was
very,
it was really useful. I mean, it's not like you stop feeling that way.
Yeah. And I always get that question from like junior associates who ask me, when does it stop? When does it go away? And I'm like, oh no, you just get better at having that stomach feeling.
No, and I think that's really true. I think, and this is something that, we talk to even law students about, or, young lawyers, is like, you're like, this is a difficult profession and you're going to be asked to do hard things that are challenging. So it's not like you're going to suddenly be really comfortable. Like you're never going to have easy questions. That's not why someone's paying you so much money for this.
Correct. And when you start getting easy questions, it means that you're not growing in your job.
Right.
And probably something has gone wrong.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody's like, oh, I'm pretty sure we already knew the answer to this, but can you go check it out? You're like, maybe they don't really trust my judgment.
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you're one of the first year associates or who's getting the easy assignments, who feels the assignments it's easy, it's probably not a good sign. You want to be the one who people are giving hard stuff to.
Yeah, and particularly I think as a young associate, you sometimes, at least as a litigator, maybe I don't know if it's true on the corporate side, but you sometimes get these questions that the people above you are pretty sure there's not actually an answer to, but someone has to go and track down the fact that there is no answer, or the answer is not what we want. And so you just go on these like wild goose chases for days and days, and you're not finding anything, and you're feeling like the stupidest person on earth. And then you go and report back, and they're like, yeah, that's pretty much what we expected. I was like, well, why didn't you tell me that?
Yeah.
But they never do. They never tell you.
That's the same. I think law is law, and big law is, in some ways, big law is big law.
Yeah. So, I mean, what advice do you have for young associates who are trying to figure out, okay, I'm in this situation, like I like some parts of it, I don't like some parts of it, I'm not sure if it's the right fit for me. Like, what should people be thinking about here?
I think that people need to have a really good idea of, even what you said is really important, to know what parts of it they like, what parts they don't like, where their strengths are. Everyone is going to be happiest in life when they're playing to their strengths. And it's easier to be successful if you're really leveraging your strengths. And I think as lawyers, we can get really focused on our weaknesses and feeling like we should be working really hard to get better at that so that we can be like this well-rounded, like super lawyer. But I think that the associates I find that I like to work with the best are the ones who I know what they're really good at. And when you're a junior associate, you don't necessarily know what you're good at yet. But once you start to become a third, fourth, fifth year, you can kind of start to see where your career could be going and to start talking to people about what it really is like to have the lifestyle. I think that's the piece that's hard for people. Is I always hear people say, I look at partners and that's not the life I want.
Right. That was pretty much my decision point.
Yeah, and that's completely fair. But as you think about how much the law has changed and how much our lifestyles and lifestyle expectations have changed, you have to start to project forward and think, what does the junior partnership look like? What are the senior associates? How are they living their life? Because they're going to set the lifestyle benchmark. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps there is a change that could be coming that you're not seeing yet, and perhaps people are talking about it, not necessarily to you. And so you want to start building alliances and relationships with people who seem to be happy and seem to be enjoying their lives and see if that's true. And if it is true, figure out how they did it. Because there's always people who have, through hard work, through leveraging technology, through the relationships they have, kind of created little silos and situations that you may not know about that are a life that you could conceive of living.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with being really good at what you do. And that goes back to what you're saying about playing to your strengths and not, you really need to be like a specialist, basically. And what you specialize in ideally needs to be valuable to at least a few people in your firm. And that's really, at least I found that's really where you can start leveraging how do you want to live? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to do whatever? You need to have something to back that up.
Absolutely. And while the reward for good work is more work, eventually the reward for good work becomes a little bit more freedom and autonomy.
Right. And I think that's a key point. I mean, everything I've read on workplace satisfaction says that one of the key predictors of who's going to be satisfied in their job is having autonomy, or at least a feeling of autonomy.
Yes. And along with that, I think a lot of it has to do with the relationships you have. Workplace satisfaction also comes with feeling like you're appreciated, acknowledged, and
all those things that big law firms are so great at doing.
And so I think that in a lot of ways, big law created the perfect environment for people to be unhappy, not intentionally, but what they thought were like good ideas for motivating people are absolutely not.
Right. Well, for example, like, we'll just pay you a bonus at the end of the year and then you'll be happy. It's like, no, you're already making enough money that another $10,000 or $15,000, all that is a way to keep score about whether someone else is getting more than you. It's not going to make you happy.
And the studies have actually shown that when you tie compensation to work, people are less likely to find the work to be satisfying because they're in it just to make the money.
Oh, you're just like ticking the boxes. I mean, I could literally, by the end of each year, I could tell you to like the quarter hour, like how many hours I needed to bill to hit a certain bonus level. And was I going to come in extra? No.
Exactly. And nobody in that situation is fulfilled, right? Like nobody.
No, it's just this game. I remember one year, I think I billed like half an hour extra on the last day to like hit some level. And I was just like, yes, they did not get, I was actually mad about the half hour, but I was like, well, at least they got like less than an hour extra of my time. And that's a horrible attitude.
It is. And to be fair, like if you read the research about how the billing started and like why the, compensation, why they started lockstep competition, it's all started, I think, at least in my reading, with good intentions.
Oh, yeah. It's just sort of spiraled out of control.
Yes. And more you see associates saying that they would take a pay cut for more autonomy. They would take a pay cut for more freedom, for more flexibility.
Oh my gosh. Like for me, it was just insane. It was like, I have to go to my office and sit there, even though all my calls are on the phone. And like, I'm not seeing anyone in person for weeks on end, except my secretary. And I still am expected to go sit in my office instead of working from wherever I want to. I'm like, this is complete madness.
Yeah. And I think that that's changing.
Oh, I agree.
So that's been one of the downsides, obviously, of being attached 24/7 to your phone is that you're on call 24/7. But it does mean that once you get better at anticipating kind of your deal flow, at least on the corporate side, it is easier to take vacations, extended vacations, even if you're willing to do a little bit of work while you're away.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this is about learning how to manage expectations. And if you can get good at, and also using technology, both to manage those expectations and to sometimes make it appear that maybe you're doing things that you're not necessarily doing at that exact moment, I think could be a really valuable skill set for an associate or really anyone working in the law.
I think, yes. I like that you said doing things like not where you're.
Well, I'm thinking, nothing nefarious, but I'm thinking of something like Boomerang.
Yes, no.
Like Boomerang, if you're not familiar with it, is a service you can use to send an email at a different time. And so, for example, my sister, who manages people at her job, she doesn't want to make, in opposition to law firm life, she doesn't want to make her people feel like they should be working all the time, even though she's working all the time. So she, for example, might be working at midnight, but she'll boomerang the email at 8 in the morning so that the person working for her doesn't have this sense that they should be responding. You can use that in a variety of ways.
And I used to do the same thing. I was on a flex time schedule at my prior firm, so I worked from home a couple days a week. And for me, the early hours when my kids were asleep was when I could kind of start looking at email, but I didn't want people to get used to me responding to email at like 6 and 7 in the morning.
Right.
So I would schedule stuff to start going out at the beginning of the workday, but that meant that I could kind of sit with my kids and take them to school during that hour and a half time when I knew emails were being sent out.
Right. And I think, I think that sort of thing is developing more and more. And I think, if you're smart about managing your time and managing other people's expectations, I think you can create these pockets and windows for yourself if you're smart about it.
Setting boundaries is really important and really, really hard for lawyers.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like trying to say no to someone who wants to give you more work. That was a skill I counseled numerous coworkers on. It's like, well, you can't take on this project. You're already maxed out. They're like, well, I have to. It's like, you can't. You can't do this. Like this is not really your problem. Like someone else is being a bad manager, and here's how you need to deal with that situation and put it back on them to figure out this problem, because you can't work like 48 hours a day.
Let's talk about management in law firms. And the lack of training in people management and project management.
It's
and how that's so much of our job. And it's one of my favorite parts of the job. I love project management. Like I loved wedding planning because I loved orchestrating kind of this large all the moving pieces, all the parts, all the contracts.
So have you done any sort of outside education or training on this, or is it just something that you're naturally drawn to?
It was something I was naturally drawn to, and then I started doing a lot of reading on and actually started doing training on in my free time, and recently taken to the partner in my firm, the managing partner of my group, and asked if they'd be willing to kind of pay for some of it, and they obviously said yes.
Nice. Another totally awesome strategy that too few people employ when they're working in a law firm or other large organization that has money for your education and is very happy to give it to you.
You have no idea how little that happens and how excited partners are to see people be engaged in their own development.
Oh, yeah.
Because they do put on all these CLEs, all these professional development
some of them have people in-house. Like I've had friends who did this and they're like, no one ever comes to talk to me. Like, I don't understand. Why are these people not interested in their own careers?
Yep. And then people pick the things they think they're supposed to go to or should go to. Like they think very within the box. And literally, I just look for things I would be interested in doing, and I see if the firm would pay for it, because it does benefit them for me to be better at leadership. And then I can bring it in-house and do little trainings at lunch, and they reap the benefits, and I reap the benefits whether I stay with them or if I go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to basically be managing your own career. I think it's Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, who wrote The Startup of You, which is basically about treating your career as an entrepreneur would create their business. And it's the same thing.
I think one of the issues that we have is that with lawyers, we start our lawyers out, and I think so many law schools do this, where you come to law school and from the very first semester, you get no choice.
Right. You're just told what to do.
Yep. And then they give you the next semester, they let you pick one class,
If you're lucky, yeah.
And so there is that conveyor belt. Someone's going to make decisions for you. And especially once you come into big law, your CLEs are figured out for you. They tell you when to go. They tell you what you need. They pay them for you. So there's very little thought into your progression. You get moved up to a second year.
When the clock changes, they're like, oh, congratulations, it's January 1st. You've just advanced, or October or whatever,
Exactly. So people become very passive in their own careers, and they don't realize that meanwhile, people who are, I don't even know what kind of jobs other people have, but I'm constantly shocked by my friends who didn't go to law school, who didn't go to grad school, who will have one job and then quit and go into a totally different industry. And I'm like, how did you do that?
Exactly.
How did you know that job even existed? As far as I'm concerned, there was a litigator and there were corporate attorneys, and then there are people who work in the government, and then there's nonprofits, and that's basically the 4 kinds of lawyers.
No, exactly. And I think that's the impression a lot of people have. And the reality is, if once you start talking, once you get in the real world and start talking to actual attorneys, you're like, oh, wow, you can specialize in that, or this or this. You find out there's this incredible array of things that you were never aware of existing. And, I think some people are totally miserable doing one thing, but it might be the case that you're perfectly happy doing something else. I mean, a friend of mine who was a big law litigator realized she hated fighting. And she's like, I went to Yale. No one ever asked me if I like to fight all the time. When I told them I was going into litigation, I feel like maybe someone should have followed up on this a little more, but okay. And, she basically spent the better part of a year, like, really exploring, like, well, what do these other options look like? She did a volunteer stint at the DA's office and, ends up basically working in a startup doing like their law department stuff and loves it.
That's a great story. And it's so interesting to me that on both sides, like no one asked her and she never like asked herself.
Well, it never occurred to me. Like no one, I was like, it's basically your choice at Columbia is like, oh, are you going to do corporate or litigation? And I was like, well, I didn't really like contracts, so I guess I'll do litigation. And that's that's the extent of it.
Yeah, no.
That's crazy. You shouldn't be making career choices because you like didn't like one class and you have no, I mean, it's just nuts.
Not that the classes are even a good indicator of what you would be doing on a day-to-day.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure I dealt with as many contracts on the litigation side as you do on the corporate side, just when they go bad.
Oh, I'd never thought about that. That's totally true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the one jury trial I did was literally a contract. It was a contract case. Like, what does this contract mean?
It's always funny when I talk to litigators and the way litigators read contracts and the way transactional corporate attorneys read contracts. It's always a funny conversation because you guys are definitely more likely to see the potential pitfalls in our drafting.
Oh, I think I don't remember, it's been a while, but I literally think this case came down to like the placement of a comma. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no one thought about this. We all know. Everybody, the lawyers know, the client knows, the judge knows, the jury knows, like everybody knows no one was thinking about this. But it is what it is. We work with the material we're given.
And we try to do our best to give you guys good material, but it's hard to think of everything.
No, and and that's what makes the law interesting. But it's also when you think about like the conversation we're having compared to like your first year contracts class, I mean, it's almost laughable like what people are learning. And
have you seen, I mean, you work and talk to a lot more law students than I do, but have you seen a change at law schools at all in that direction? I know there's been conversations that people want to have more real world application.
Yeah, I think some schools are starting to change in certain ways that are positive. On the whole, I would say they're still pretty much the same as they've always been. I think certain schools like Georgetown comes to mind. They have a very robust first year program that tries to help students figure out like, well, what is a good fit for me? Not just like, do you want to do litigation or corporate, but like really, what are my values? What are my goals? What's going to make me happy? And, I think that's a great start. I think they also do some stuff about, self-management and mindfulness and all this sort of happiness training stuff that I'm sure, both read, which I think is great because these are the things, a legal career is a long career. It's a lot of stress and that sort of thing. And I think giving people the skills to deal with that earlier really is only going to help in the end.
That makes me really happy to hear because the reason I started the Happy Lawyer Project is because I do feel like we don't give people these skills, and some of the best people in the profession who I know personally leave because they don't have these skills, not because they wouldn't be great lawyers or great advocates for their clients. And I think when only a certain personality type is staying in the law, we do a disservice to the profession.
I think that's absolutely right. I think this is essentially, on some level, a helping profession, and I'm not sure that the lawyers who stay are necessarily the ones who view it that way. So tell me more about the Happy Lawyer Project, because we are actually almost running out of time, and I do want to hear more about this.
Yeah, so the Happy Lawyer Project is just a passion project of mine that I started to kind of create a platform to talk to lawyers who are happy and figure out what the skills and tools and tips they have are, because I love having these conversations, and I find them uplifting and inspirational because the hardest part for me about being a lawyer is hanging out with other lawyers. Like,
that's why I prefer hanging out with law students. They're not quite so jaded yet.
Yeah. I mean, they're just not the happiest people. And that's not necessarily, doesn't have to be the case. And with technology being what it is, I've just made some of the best friends it's unbelievable the quality of people I've met through this podcast that I started. And so now, hopefully in the next year, I'm going to build it out so that I can start bringing people together more to talk about how they're doing what they're doing and how young lawyers can kind of change the way we practice law so that we build happiness into the equation.
And what kind of themes are emerging from the people that you talk to?
I mean, a lot of the themes that we've talked about today, it's about, one, believing you can be happy in the law. Two, it's doing things that make you feel good, like accomplishing things. It sucks to be bad at things, and it sucks to fail at things. So it's good to do things within your strengths that you can be good at and can get better at. It's good to have a clear vision for where you're going, to have goals, to be able to accomplish those goals. I think a lot of people leave Big Law because they say, I don't want to be a partner, but then they don't know why they're there because they're not working towards anything. They're working towards the paycheck.
Right. And at some point, that's probably not super fulfilling for most people.
Yep. And then last but not least, I think it's living a life that's in alignment with what your vision is for where you're going. I think people think they want to have this certain type of life, whether it's having kids, whether it's not having kids, whether it's going on vacations, whether it's living in a tiny house on a ranch in Montana. Like, I don't know what your vision for your life is, but the people who are really happy have started crafting a career that actually lines up with that. So, I mean, it sounds so obvious, but I'm constantly surprised by the number of young lawyers I talk to who I say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you don't necessarily need to, know exactly where you are, but you need to have had some thought about the direction you're headed. And for so many of them, the first thing they say is where they want to be in their careers. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but you have a whole life. Like, how does that fit into your whole life? And they're like, what do you mean?
Right, I have a life. Yeah, the other thing I see sometimes when you ask people stuff like that is they tell you what they don't want to be doing.
Yep.
Yeah. Like, well, I know I don't want to be in Big Law. It's like, okay, yep. Well, that's good information, but that's not really, I mean, you're just going to be in an abyss. That's the only, like, what else is out there? Like, what does this look like for you? I mean, I'll be honest, I hate the 5-year question. Lee and I always joke, we're like, actually, it's kind of ironic because we started, I just got a thing saying, my Tumblr for the Girls Guide to Law School is 5 years old. So, I mean, if you'd asked me 5 years ago when I started that Tumblr, like, would my life look like it does now? I would have been like, no. So, but I value the insight that you need to at least be having some idea what you're looking for, or you're just going to end up in some random place that you're not probably what you want.
There is a weird balance that I also struggle with holding between having a vision for my life, but not holding onto it so tightly that it becomes a restriction, a limiting belief around my life. So I totally take your point, because I also never, ever, ever, if you would ask me as a first-year associate if I would be in Big Law 5 years down the road, I would have said absolutely not.
Yeah. So I think what you said earlier, something about like, I can't remember exactly how you put it. It was very well phrased, but something about, planning around your priorities, not around like some, outcome or something like that, I think is a good way of looking at it. Like you were clear on what you wanted your life to look like in at least broad outline. And then if the Big Law job fits into that, fantastic. Yep.
When it stops serving my life goals, that's when I'm done.
Right. And that's what the judge who I worked for said. He's like, go to Big Law, make it work, and then just make sure you can leave when you want to leave, because that day will probably come for most people, maybe not, but most likely. So just don't put yourself in particularly a financial position where you cannot leave if you decide to leave. And I think that's good advice for everything.
That's the absolute key. The financial piece is so important.
We could do an entire other episode on that. Maybe we should. But unfortunately, we are out of time. If people want to find out about the Happy Lawyer Project, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best place to reach me is on the website at www.thehappylawyerproject.com.
Awesome. And that's a podcast, right?
It is a podcast, and the website should be launching this month. So
congratulations.
You can check out more there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to have to subscribe to the podcast. Despite running a podcast, I admit I hardly listen to them, but I will put you on the list of people I will listen to. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app. We would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We release new episodes on Monday. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at Alison, 1L, Allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.